Tonight, from the TVW studios in Olympia, Republican Loren Culp and Democrat Jay Inslee meet in the only debate in the race for Washington governor. This debate has been organized by the Washington State Debate Coalition and its premier media partners. Seattle City Club founded the coalition to enhance voter access to those who hold and seek our state's highest offices. Thank you to the Washington State Debate Coalition's lead sponsor, AARP Washington. To preserve social distancing, the moderators are seated in the main studio, while the candidates are alone in separate rooms elsewhere in the building. This debate will be moderated by 4 broadcast political reporters. Essex Porter from Cairo 7, Randy Cruz, Q13 News, Chris Daniels, King 5, and Melissa Santos, KCTS 9, Crosscut.
And good evening from the TVW studios in Olympia, and to all of you watching across the state from Spokane to Sedro-Woolley, from Omak to Ocean Shores, and from Washtenaw to Walla Walla. Let's bring in our 2 candidates for governor, the incumbent Washington Governor Jay Inslee and Republic Police Chief Loren Culp. First of all, tonight, gentlemen, I need an affirmative that you can hear us from the studio.
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful. And we do want to let viewers know at home that the candidates are alone in those rooms that you see them in there. They are upstairs from us here in the studio. There are no campaign staffers allowed in there. No members of the production crew are in the rooms with them. And they also were not allowed to bring in any notes or cell phones or computers. It's just them in there. The candidates do have screens, however, where they can see each other. They can see us, the moderators, and they can, of course, see the digital time cues.
I'm going to go over the format for tonight's debate. It's somewhat different from last week's presidential debate. We will begin with opening statements. Questions will be asked of both candidates, who will have timed answers and rebuttals. The moderator may ask a follow-up question, and we will end with closing statements.
The candidates have agreed that they will not interrupt each other. We, the moderators, will enforce the rules. As you watch the debate, we invite you to join the conversation on social media using the hashtag WAELEX. That's hashtag WAELEX. And with that, it is time for opening statements. We have already flipped a coin. Loren Culp will go first. And Mr. Culp, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everyone. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you to the governor for agreeing to this, although I would have preferred it to be on the same stage. I appreciate your cooperation in at least getting this part done. This is the most important conversation I believe that this state is going to have and needs to have for the next 4 years of our state. What we have right here in Washington is a leadership crisis. I've been in leadership positions my entire life. I served in the United States Army. I was a sergeant. I went through drill sergeant school. I also went through the Non-Commissioned Officers Academy. I was an honor graduate from the Non-Commissioned Officers Academy. I was also an honor graduate from my advanced individual training class. I trained civilians into being soldiers. After my military service in the 101st Airborne Division, I went into the civilian workforce. I learned the building trades and worked in the Olympia area, right where we're at right now. I worked for other people for 3 or 4 years. And then in 1988, I started my own construction business, working right out of Olympia, right here. I built that up from nothing, ran it over 20 years, and then realized my childhood dream in 2010 and became a police officer. I've been in leadership positions my entire life. I've got 3 different careers where I've been in leadership, and this state is in a leadership crisis right now. You can tell that by the governor just taking a big pay raise and saying that he can't control that. Well, he can issue executive orders to affect your pay and your job and your business, but apparently he can't issue an executive order to stop his own pay raise. So that's a little bit one-sided. I think we need some strong leadership, and we need someone who's going to represent we the people and stand up for citizens' rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Culp. Governor Inslee, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here tonight with the coalition and Chief Culp. I am delighted that the extraordinary Seattle Storm are again world champions. And I'm really delighted that tonight we can have a discussion about why our state should be confident that we can defeat the COVID pandemic and that we can rebuild our economy. And fundamentally, the reason we should be confident is because of the extraordinary work that we have done together in the last few years. And it is extraordinary. We have done great work in healthcare for the healthcare needs of our people. 800,000 people now having insurance, and now having started the first public option in the United States. Working people have needed help, and we have produced extraordinary benefits with the best pay family and medical leave policy in the United States, the highest minimum wage, and the best overtime rules. Our children obviously need a great education, and we should be proud that we've accomplished the best, most generous financial aid program for our college students and apprenticeships programs for those going into the skilled trades. We've accomplished so much in clean energy. But tonight we have a bigger question to answer, and that is, are we going to step up and fight the COVID pandemic? Or are we going to belittle it, to ignore it, and in some sense surrender to it? And I feel very strongly we have to stand up and face this and beat this virus into the ground. We have to do smart things, including wearing a mask and social distancing, because we know that these things work. And when we follow science in Washington, as we do, good things happen. We are a science-oriented state, and we can use our science and our heads and beat this virus. And the reason is so we can reopen our economy, and I'm looking forward to that. So let's get started.
Governor Inslee, thank you. We're going to move on now to questions, and the topic is COVID-19 and the clear differences between the two candidates. Chief Culp, the first question is going to be for you. While President Trump's COVID-19 diagnosis certainly brought out well wishes, it also renewed criticism that he doesn't take the virus seriously. You have faced the same criticism. You called the mask mandate a, quote, bunch of crap. You continue to hold large campaign rallies where hundreds of people are in attendance. What do you say to those who believe that your approach would not only kill more people, but would prolong the pandemic? You have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
Right. I've never come out and spoke against wearing masks. I came out against the direction and the order from the government, a public servant that sits in the governor's office. Everyone in government, whether appointed or elected, are public servants. And I firmly believe in individual freedom and liberty. I believe in safety, obviously. I've been working in public safety for the last 10 years. The problem is when we have one person sitting in the governor's office telling everyone what they're going to wear, whether they're going to go to work or whether they're not going to go to work. That's the problem that I've had with this. And as governor, I would put out the information with medical professionals, tell everyone what's going on, what they should do to protect themselves, and what might happen if they don't. And make sure the supply chain is open for the equipment that's needed, and then let free individual citizens decide what's best for themselves, their family, and their business. Because you can't tell me that a barber with one customer in his store can't cut that person's hair safely and protect him and his customers, but a marijuana store or an abortion clinic or a big box store is okay to open with 100 or 200 people in it. That is not common sense, and it's lacking in the governor's office right now, and I will bring that to Olympia.
And remember, we will have time for rebuttals and follow-ups, but first, Governor Inslee, to you. Washingtonians have now been living under your COVID mandates for 200 days, more than 200 days. They were told first to stay home, stay healthy. 3 months ago, you told them that if they masked up, we could open up. In May, you introduced a phased-in approach to reopen the economy called Safe Start, but just 2 months after that, it paused indefinitely. And despite announcing just 1 day before this debate that you would start to lift more restrictions because we've made progress, counties still can't move into the next phase. Why should voters, after 7 months, believe that you have a coherent plan to reopen the state? You have 1 minute and 15 seconds.
It's really quite simple. It is because we are saving Washington's lives by the hundreds, maybe the thousands. There's been 210,000 people who've lost their lives in America, over 2,000 in the state of Washington. And our fundamental duty is to save those lives. And there's good news here, because this is working. This is working big time. I'm pleased to share with my fellow Washingtonians that tonight, what we have done in our social distancing, in our masking campaign, because Washingtonians are not listening to Donald Trump, and frankly, Chief Culp, they are wearing masks. They are socially distancing. And as a result of that, we have lowered our infection rate dramatically. Tonight, we were fortunate 45 other states in the United States have higher infection numbers, some 5, 10 times more than the state of Washington. This translates for people going home with their families, parents being able to see their children, grandparents that I think still have value, I believe, in this society. Their lives will be saved. And we are opening our economy. We've been doing that for 2 months. We've opened all kinds of bowling alleys, more restaurant activity, wedding parlors, agribusiness, and that will continue in the next few weeks.
Chief Culp, you have the first chance at rebuttal here. I do want you to speak specifically. We've talked about the governor's mandates. Do you believe that the governor's mandates have ultimately saved lives? And you have 45 seconds to respond to the governor's answer there.
Yes, he claims that his mandates are saving lives. But the federal government set the state approximately $29 per patient per day in our nursing homes. And we know by the data that those are the most vulnerable among us is the people living in nursing homes, the elderly. Over 61% of the people who have died have been in nursing homes. The federal government sent $29 per patient per day for nursing homes for extra staff, extra equipment. And this governor said, no, we're not sending them $29 per day for extra staff and extra equipment in nursing homes. We're only sending them $5 a day. I would like to know where the rest of that money's going because it came up to about $41 million, I believe.
Governor Inslee, I want to give you a chance at a rebuttal here to what Chief Culp has said. And I also want you to just weigh in. He talks a lot about the Constitution and that being his guidebook for how he'd handle this and how he'd govern in general. So can you just touch on also in your response how you use the Constitution, the state Constitution, when you go about putting some of these mandates down and making these decisions?
Well, I follow the Constitution in all its respects, and I've done that in this. I've done this in gun safety, and we have saved lives. This is scientifically proven. There's no debate about this. It is clear for Donald Trump and Chief Culp to deny that is really quite extraordinary. The scientific community is clear. It has saved thousands of lives, and more importantly, it will save thousands of more lives in this country and in this state if we continue this course. No court has struck down any of my decisions that are obviously controversial. Look, this has been hard on people. Saving lives sometimes is not easy. People have had all kinds of difficulties in their lives and their businesses. But it unequivocally has shown. We had an infection disease doctor yesterday. Check his testimony out. He'll tell you.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
I want to talk about Boeing and Governor Inslee. We are going to start with you on this question. You have said that Boeing threatened you, mugged you, to get the largest tax break for a corporation in Washington state history. You personally called for a special session years ago to get $8.7 billion in tax incentives in exchange for the production of the 77X line. But now Boeing, as you know, is moving the entire 787 production line from Everett to North Charleston, South Carolina. Did you get fooled?
No. In fact, we built into that agreement things that had not been built in the 787 deal that was done before I was governor. And they are not building a second line for the 777. So no. We made a decision about jobs. I'm all about jobs, and I come from surrounded by Boeing families in my cousins and my best friends growing up. And I believe that these planes should be made here. We have the best workers in the world on this. To go elsewhere did not make sense. And if it did make sense, the thing that is most disappointing to me is that the company did not give us any way to consider bringing them back when market conditions improve. Look, I can read. I know that the market has been down for airplanes. But this market is going to come back. And when it comes back, the Boeing company needs to treat taxpayers fairly. So we need to look at their tax breaks, to act in a responsible way so that they have an incentive to bring these jobs back and make sure the next airplane is made here as well. I believe that should happen, both because it's the best place to make airplanes, according to the Teal Group, and it's a fair treatment of Washington citizens, and I think we should ask for that.
Loren Culp, you've talked about your construction and Western Washington ties. You also know that a lot of these jobs tied to Boeing are in King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. You are from the east side of the state. What would you do to keep those jobs in Western Washington?
Okay, well, as far as being from the eastern side of the state, I lived most of my life actually on the western side. Jay Inslee is also from the east side. I don't. You guys keep trying to pigeonhole me like it's a negative. I love this entire state, north, south, east, west. But the problem in this state right now is the governor has lost touch with reality. He's been working in government for decades. He has no clue what's going on in the real world. He's never built a business from the ground up. I have. I started my business with one single employee and an old truck that I had bought from my grandpa on payments. I had a homemade single axle trailer. That's how I started my construction business, and I built that up over 20 years, where I had multiple trucks and crews doing jobs all around Puget Sound. This governor has no clue what it's like in the real world. This is not a business-friendly state. It has not been a business-friendly state for a long time, and he has exacerbated that by his mandates, extra regulations, and higher taxes. This is a governor who promised 8 years ago that he would not raise taxes, and he has lied to us 33 times. The state budget has almost doubled under his tenure. And when I'm governor, this will be a business-friendly state. Businesses like Boeing will want to come here and stay here.
Governor, I want to give you a chance at a rebuttal, and also I want to ask you about a comment that you made by publicly threatening Boeing with taking a hard look at those tax breaks. Aren't you playing with fire here?
No, we're playing with common sense, which is the citizens of this state should be treated fairly. And that means as Boeing's futures improve, which they will, we want them to be inspired and incentivized to come build planes here. And this is one way to do it. And if we give them an incentive, they might think twice about leaving more jobs. And that's a fair thing. This business thing is interesting. You know, we had the highest rate of GDP growth a year or two ago under my stewardship. Our state has been named the best place to do business by Business Insider and CNBC. It has been named the best place to live, and that's why people are moving here like crazy. People are coming from all over here. If this is such a terrible business place, why do these businesses keep coming here and growing? This is a growth-oriented state. It is going to grow again when we defeat this COVID pandemic.
Governor, I need to cut you off on time there, and Chief Culp, I want to give you a chance at a rebuttal. You know, there aren't a lot of large global aerospace firms that are in Republic and Ferry County. What makes you think you're better equipped to deal with a company that size, given your background?
Well, the thing is, this current governor thinks he's the leader of everyone. He thinks he's the leader of companies. He thinks he's the leader of our families. He thinks he's the leader of our children and our businesses. That's exactly the opposite that's true. The governor is not the leader of the citizens' lives or their businesses or their families. The governor's job is to run the executive branch of the state government and keep it within the confines of the Constitution, which is the rule of law. He raised his right hand and swore an oath that I will uphold and defend the Constitution of the state of Washington, and he's failing. Article 1, Section 7 says that no citizen shall be disturbed in their private affairs. I think we've been disturbed in our private affairs quite a bit by this governor.
Thank you.
Mr. Culp, this next question goes to you. You have said you do not believe there is systemic racism. How then do you explain some of the big disparities? For example, the median income of white families in Seattle is 2.5 times that of black families, and Hispanic people are hospitalized with COVID at 4 times the rate of white people in King County. And what policies would you implement to close this gap?
The federal government and the state government have laws in both constitutions that say that everyone will be treated equally, regardless of their race, their sex, their gender, or their orientation. And I firmly believe that that's the way that it is and should be. There are racists among us, and we need to root those people out when they commit crimes. Hate crimes is a felony in this state, and it needs to be enforced. The biggest way that you bring in racial inequality is when you don't enforce the laws evenly. And currently we have a governor who breaks the laws and commits misdemeanors and no repercussions. No one's held responsible. You know, if you want to talk about racial inequality, let's talk about the human trafficking that's going on in this state and in a big way. And usually young women and young boys are the victims of that. What's this governor doing about that? And then look at all the unsolved murders of our Native American people. What's going on with that? That's racial inequality. That's real racial inequality. And if the system is racist, who has been in charge of the system in Washington State for the last 35 years? The Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Culp. Governor Inslee, this question to you as well. Do you believe in systemic racism? And what concrete steps beyond appointing task force or committees will you implement to close the many gaps between the races?
Well, the racial disparities is something I think that all of us should want to do something about. They are profound. You know, white families have 10 times as much wealth as black families. We have racial disparities in education. We have racial disparities in healthcare. It has not helped that we've had a president who has fanned the flames of division in this regard. And we have to act. We have to act in many ways. And one of the things I hope is that our action is not limited to looking at criminal justice issues. Yes, we are going to do things to assure independent evaluations and investigations and independent prosecutorial decisions. I'm confident we'll pass that legislation in January. But I think this is a window to do much more. I think let's look at a way to get kids of color that are ready for kindergarten and ready for first grade so they don't fall behind. Let's look for health care. And by the way, this world of Donald Trump and Chief Culp means we will not have health care for many people of color. We've got health care now for 800,000 people right now because of Obamacare. And you can be sure that is not going to be protected if my opponent became governor. So these are concrete steps we're taking, and we've just started an Office of Equity, and I'm confident we're going to make progress in January.
And Mr. Culp, an opportunity for a rebuttal. And as you do, would you talk more about any policies that you think government should implement to close some of these gaps beyond criminal justice, the economic gaps between the races?
Everyone should have equal opportunity in the United States. One of my best friends immigrated here from Kenya at a young age. This was the land of opportunity. This was where he could live his dreams and do anything that he wanted to do. And he immigrated here legally. And now he's the owner of a company that has about 800 or 900 employees. I want that opportunity for everyone. And so often, politicians pander to minorities when it's election time and say how much they're going to do for the minorities and how much they care. And then after the election, turn their back on them. That's why we still have the same problems we've had for the last 15 or 20 years in our inner city.
Governor Inslee, your rebuttal, would you go beyond offering opportunity? Does more need to be done than just offering opportunity?
Yes, the first thing we need to do is to stop the Republicans from taking away the things that do have a chance of ending this disparity. I do have to express frustration on occasion with my Republican colleagues who talk about equality, but every time we actually want to do something about it, they oppose it. Let's start with health care. Look, health care is one of the most important, precious things we have right now. It is important. We do have disparities in health care. They actually want to take it away from 800,000 Washingtonians. I can't see how this makes us a more equal position. They have not helped us on a host of family leave issues, from family leave. I did overtime rules to protect working people myself. So we have done a lot. Financial aid, apprenticeships. I've started an apprenticeship program, probably leading the nation. This is great to help kids of color get new careers.
Governor, we have to
Yet he
wrap
wants
this
to
up.
return me out of office.
Thank you both.
Governor, I want to ask you a question, turning the question to police reform and actually reforming police departments. Since the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police, we have heard many discussions about how to hold police more accountable for abuses of force. You just spoke about independent investigations, but I want to ask you about two other sort of reforms. Do you want to see the end of qualified immunity that protects abusive police officers from civil lawsuits? And do you support rewriting police union contracts to allow cities to reform and restructure their police departments?
So I'm open to discussions with the community, and rather than run out and propose solutions to all these things myself, I have decided to listen to the citizens. And so we have a task force that is led by the black community. I think listening is pretty powerful right now to the people who have suffered this indignity and violence, and that's what we're doing. As you noted, I am confident we will pass the rule on independent investigation and independent prosecutorial, and we'll listen to other ideas that are brought before us. One way or another, we have to bring more justice. We can do that. that is not inimical or inconsistent with good policing. I also believe we need to look at ways to provide help for folks in mental health problems. We've had some disasters where police are called and people have been in mental health crises. I think we have to find a way to deal with those mental health challenges to prevent some of this violence. And again, I want to note that this whole debate, I hope it comes from a broad scale societal conversation about how to get to racial inequity, and I believe we can do that.
Thank you, Governor. Chief Culp, I want to ask you the same questions. You have worked in law enforcement for a decade. I would like to hear your views on this, on qualified immunity. Do you want to see an end to the qualified immunity that protects abusive police officers from civil lawsuits? And do you think that police union contracts need to be rewritten so that cities can have different police reforms and restructure their departments?
Well, I don't agree with the way you formed that question. Qualified immunity does not protect abusive officers. Officers are prosecuted all the time for committing crimes. And the governor talking about mental health in this state, let me tell you a thing or two about the mental health problem in this state. I've dealt with it on the street level. I was a narcotics detective for 3 years. I've dealt with people in addiction. I've dealt with people in mental health crisis. And the mental health system in this state is a joke. And he's had 8 years to do something about it. But he lost certification to Western State Hospital. And with that went hundreds of beds and millions of dollars from the federal government for our mental health system in this state so that we can help people that are on the streets and in mental health crisis. When an officer, and this happens every single day, every single night all across this state, I have had this happen almost every time. When someone tries to take their life, obviously they are in a mental health crisis. They are taken to the hospital by a police officer and talk to the first level mental health counselor, and they call around this state to try to find a bed for them to get higher level of care. And 9 times out of 10, there isn't one, and they're turned back out on the street. Thank you, Governor Inslee.
Governor Inslee, we're going to have 45 seconds for a rebuttal to what Chief Culp just said about mental health, and also anything else you want to add about his statement.
Well, we are moving on to a major reform of our mental health care system. We have improved it significantly. Our hospital improved significantly over the last few years, but it is an ancient facility, and we need to reform our system, and that's why we are starting a program to get mental health in communities, to have community-based mental health where it's closer to people. But if people don't have insurance, they cannot pay for this. And the fundamental problem of Chief Culp, when he talks about this issue, is his party and his president want to take away health insurance and mental health insurance from 800,000 people. And then whenever we talk about actually paying for this, they want to cut the budgets. His very opening statement was how he wants to cut the budgets. Well, if you're going to cut the budgets, you're going to cut people who are in pain, including mental health pain. We need to care for people.
Thank you, Governor Inslee. Chief Culp, I want to give you a moment to respond to that, but I do want to ask you a little bit about, you have said that good police officers arrest the bad ones and put them in jail where they belong, but we do see police officers who are rehired after being fired for misuses of force. Can you address that?
Yeah, can you tell me which circumstance you're talking about, which officer?
For instance, in Seattle, this often happens with appeals to arbitration, where an officer is fired, appeals to an arbitrator, and then they are reinstated. In Seattle, it happened when a man punched a handcuffed woman in the face and broke her eye socket while she was handcuffed, and then he was fired but reinstated when he appealed to an arbitrator. So I'm curious if, how would you address or anything like that dealing with arbitration?
Well, that sounds like that was Chief Best's department, and you're telling me that she's not for law and order, she's racist or some way?
I did not.
I'm not sure.
I did not say that.
Okay, so I don't know the details of that case. Anytime an officer abuses their power, they should be held accountable. I'm all for that.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your responses, gentlemen.
All right, we're going to move on to the topic of civil unrest. Just a friendly reminder to try really hard to answer the question that's asked of you. That's why we're here. Governor Inslee, the first question is going to go to you. Nearly 2 days after demonstrators took over an area outside the Seattle Police Department's East Precinct, dubbing it an autonomous zone, you claimed not to know about it, despite it being the subject of nonstop local and national news coverage, despite it trending nationwide on Twitter. What should voters make of the fact that you were apparently oblivious to police abandoning an entire precinct in the state's largest city? You have 1 minute, 15 seconds.
Yeah, well, listen, if you look at the facts of that situation, I could not have been oblivious to it because I actually deployed the Washington State National Guard.
Sir, then why did you
Hundreds-
say you did not know about it?
You'll have to go back and look at some quote. I can't comment on the quote right now, but I can tell you that what we did is to respond when cities, and the cities, of course, are the ones responsible for their initial security, and we support the cities. And when they asked us to send the National Guard, we responded promptly, and we sent the National Guard, I believe in the hundreds. When they asked for assistance from the Washington State Patrol, our Washington State Patrol went. In fact, our Washington State Patrol was ready, and I had cleared this decision when the decision was made by the city to bring back police forces into that area. And they were ready, they were staged, in fact, if they were needed. So it is clear that we did provide support as appropriate. But this is a very frustrating situation, I'll tell you why. You had tens of thousands of people peacefully protesting, tens of thousands of people marching without breaking windows, without starting fires. And in their midst, these folks came in and caused violence. And it was very frustrating to those who believe this is a righteous cause, but don't want to see this violence. This violence is unacceptable to all of us from any source, and it should stop.
Just so I'm clear, Governor, because I feel like I need to address that with you right now. Your quote was, "This is news to me." You went on to say, "I haven't heard about it from any credible source." Nearly 2 days after CHOP happened, you're now saying you did know about CHOP.
Listen, I can't tell. I knew about CHOP. That's why we had state troopers ready to respond at the city's request. So if I made a misstatement,
Okay.
I made a misstatement. But clearly I did. That's why we sent troops. So this was something we did respond to Seattle's request. And
Okay, we'll follow back up on that, sir. I'll give you time for rebuttal to Chief Culp. Chief Culp, on the topic of civil unrest, 1 minute, 15 seconds. We're talking about the nightly protests Seattle dealt with, at times riots over the summer. Washington leaders, including the governor, pushed back at the idea of federal intervention when it was suggested by the president. If elected governor, under what specific conditions, would you support the presence of federal forces on local streets in response to civil unrest?
Right. We currently have a governor that's very soft on crime. That's obvious. He doesn't know that crimes are being happened, that parts of Seattle have been taken over. And I saw him in that live conference. It was clear that he had no clue what was going on, or he was lying, or one or the other. And yes, he did send in the National Guard. You know, and we all have a right to peaceably assemble and speak our mind, right? That's our First Amendment right. But when it turns violent, when people start looting stores, when they light buildings on fire, cars on fire, and throw rocks and frozen water bottles at our police, that's no longer a First Amendment right. That's a crime. It's called rioting. And although the governor did send in troops, the National Guard, you know, because the governor is the commander-in-chief of the Washington State National Guard, he sent them in there at the request of local law enforcement, but he disarmed them before he sent them in. I will never, ever send our young men and women in uniform into a violent situation without the means to protect themselves and other people. That's what they're going in there for. And when people are committing crimes, the National Guard will assist the local law enforcement to arrest the criminals and put them in jail where they belong. And the rest of the people that are involved in it will be told to disperse because it is a riot. And if they do not disperse, they will be arrested as well. That's how you deal with crime. That's how you shut down a riot.
Okay, Chief, I'll follow back up with you on the question I had asked about federal intervention here in your rebuttal time. Governor Inslee, in your rebuttal time, quickly, was it your decision not to arm the National Guard? Because I recall it as the governor or as the mayor's decision. And also, do you support the federal prosecution of accused rioters, such as people who assault police officers or burn down buildings? 45 seconds.
Yes, I do support prosecution of anyone involved in violent activity that is a crime. I used to prosecute drunk driving cases and spousal abuses cases, and so I do support that. These were decisions that are led by the democratically elected officials in the cities. We sent help not only to Seattle, we sent State Patrol to Spokane, I believe to Bellevue, so we have helped in numerous cities during these difficult times. And they have acted appropriately. General Dougherty, who I think is a fantastic general, he has helped me in many, many emergencies like Oso and the bridge falling down. He does a great job. And what he told me was, we do not, and he did not want firearms. He did not believe that more firearms was the answer to sort of magnify and give potential violence to this situation. Unfortunately, no one was hurt of the armed guard because I respect these people. They do fantastic work. And so we want to continue to to follow the law. And by the way, we're on the following the law. Excuse me, do I have 45 seconds? Excuse me, Brandy.
Yes, your 45 seconds ran out. If you want to
Oh, I'm sorry.
finish off on 1 sec, if you want to finish
No,
your
no,
sentence.
it's a little curious to me that we have a police officer consciously violating the law, refusing to enforce gun safety laws, and then say the answer is more guns on our streets.
All right,
we need
Chief
people
Culp,
to follow the law.
I want to give you a 45-second rebuttal, and why don't you respond to what the governor just said right there? Because you know there are voter-approved gun control measures, the mandates that courts have upheld that the governor put down that you refuse to follow. Is it law and order for everybody else, but not for you? 45 seconds.
Police officers have discretion to enforce or not enforce. You ever get pulled over and not get a ticket? Police officers have discretion. Chiefs of police and sheriffs have discretion on what their departments are going to enforce, what they're going to focus on, whether it's drug crime, sex trafficking, or speeding. That's up to the discretion of the chief law enforcement in that agency. And for me to make that decision is based on the Washington State Constitution, which you, Governor, raised your right hand and took an oath to uphold and defend. Have you ever heard of Article 1, Section 24? The right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. I'm sure that you can understand that. If not, maybe your grandkids can tell you, sir.
All right.
Well, if you'd like me to answer that question, I will.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're out of time on this topic. Over to Chris Daniels.
All right, let's pivot to the budget and we're going to start with you, Loren Culp. There was some good news, actually, from the state's Economic and Revenue Forecast Council, which said last month that the projected budget shortfall will not be as bad as first thought, but still significant, as well over $4 billion. I know you used the words pigeonholing earlier, but those are bigger numbers than anything that you have had to deal with in Republic or Ferry County. In fact, your police station is smaller than the TVW building that we are in right now. So what is your plan? Where do you cut?
Yes, and a career politician is obviously doing a great job. So what we have to do is freeze spending. As soon as they take office, we're going to freeze spending. We're not going to have any new programs, no pay raises, no new equipment. We're going to take a snapshot in time and find out where we are. And then we're going to take a look and do programmatic cuts from the bottom up. And that's the way it's got to be done. Look at every program. And it's going to be the hard work. I'm not going to do like the current governor does and suggests all the time, across the board cuts. That's the lazy politician's way of doing it. In the business world, which I spent 20 years in, if you do across the board cuts, you're cutting your sales force. You're cutting your fuel for your crews to get to jobs. You're cutting your advertising budget. It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. Across the board cuts are the politicians' lazy way of doing things. We need to go through the budget line item by line item and do a programmatic cuts. And I would start specifically with anything that has the word study in it. Politicians love to study things to death. They spend and waste millions and millions of dollars on study after study after study, but it's a way for crony capitalism. It's a way for them to get money to their friends.
Well, let me follow up with you, Governor. There are going to be spending needs, but there are also spending shortfalls. Despite that good news, the state transportation's revenues are short $701 million coming up in this next budget cycle. You look at a place like West Seattle with a need for fixing a bridge there. It's a bridge that not only supports 100,000 people, but the Port of Seattle, the Washington State ferry system, Sound Transit, down the road. Can the state afford to put money into transportation projects given the revenue shortfalls right now?
Well, I will be talking to legislators. I actually had discussions yesterday with them to see about a potential transportation budget in the next session. And we have had huge progress. We passed the largest transportation budget and the most environmentally friendly budget, perhaps in state history, after the Republicans said no for 3 years. So I am willing to fight for transportation. And I think we need a big capital budget this year so we can actually put people to work. But obviously we need to look at rational cuts. I actually have cut over $500 million myself by executive action in the last 2 months. So over $1.5 billion. I've already made those cuts. And those were painful at times, but they were necessary, and I've already prepared us to get us in better position. And I've been vindicated in my decision about special session because we have got $4.5 billion extra revenue moving forward. But the plans I have seen from from Chief Culp and the Republican parties essentially boiled down to taking away people in the middle of a pandemic. We should not take away health care from people who have cancer or COVID right now in the middle of a pandemic. We should not take away their mental health. We should not take away the right for a woman's right of choice and the ability to finance that. And that is very much at risk right now.
And Governor,
So
I'm
we
going to
have
need to
different
cut you
views.
there on time, Governor, and I want to give Chief Culp you a chance to rebut the governor. He just said he was vindicated in his decision to not call for a special session. Do you feel the same way? And do you also feel that there should be any sort of state money put to a project like the West Seattle Bridge that engineers feel could collapse?
Well, it's kind of funny what he takes credit for, you know, but everything that goes wrong is somebody else's fault. And this is a governor, you know, he's talking about not taking money away from the taxpayers. Well, maybe we should talk about the $164,000 a week that this governor paid a global consulting firm to tell him what to do and what to say on the COVID crisis. And I didn't misspeak. $164,000 per week is a no-bid contract that he signed with a global consulting firm. That's taxpayer money. How many businesses that he put out of business would that help? How many small mom and pop shops would that help? How much unemployment got sent overseas? Maybe that could be put into there instead of in a global consulting firm to tell him what to think and say.
Governor Inslee, I'd like to give you a chance to rebut the claims just made there by Chief Culp. You have 45 seconds.
I have no idea what he's referring to, but we have made good decisions on dealing with COVID. Let's talk about what's really on the table here. That is whether we're going to save lives, whether we're going to have leadership to help people wear masks, which Chief Culp has never provided. Not only has he disagreed with my orders, but he hasn't been willing to show leadership, which is kind of modeling your behavior. Going around in rallies with no mask, hobnobbing with the Trumpians. You know, we just can't, it's too dangerous to have a mini Trump right now in the middle of this pandemic. That's what is at risk. And I am in favor of saving lives. I am in favor of following science. I am in favor of valuing everybody's life and not diminishing them. And I'm in favor of doing things that are working. Our efforts against this pandemic are working. It's saving lives, and we ought to keep doing it.
Governor, Chief, thank you.
Next question is for you to begin with, Mr. Culp, and let's talk about these fires that we have seen in our state, these intense fires. You've raised the question that the wildfires were coordinated. Do you have any direct evidence of that, and what role, if any, do you think that climate change plays?
I don't believe I ever said that these fires were coordinated.
No, actually, it is on your website, a conversation with people who have had their homes devastated. You raised the question that they were coordinated. It seemed like it felt coordinated to you. I just wondered if you were responding to any evidence of that.
Okay, do I get my time back, or is that
Please go ahead.
not the case? Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, I talked to a firefighter when I was in Okanagan visiting the families that were burned out over there. And the firefighter told me that they were just minutes behind the person who started that fire in the Okanagan area. And so that's where that came from. I don't have any evidence. It's kind of suspect that all those fires started at the same time with no storms going on. But this governor calls these climate fires. That's nothing. I mean, he's just deflecting from, you know, like I said earlier, nothing is his fault. Everything is someone else's fault. And in this instance, he's blaming these fires on the climate. You know, and I don't deny that the climate changes. You know, I remember in the 70s, it was all over the news that we were in a global cooling and then global warming and now climate change. The climate changes. I don't dispute that. But these are not climate fires. These fires are the result of very poor management on the state level. We don't log our forests and replant them. We don't thin the forest. We don't clean up the carbon on the forest floor. And we've been shutting down road access, which limits firefighters to get back and fight these fires, as well as access for the citizens to cut wood and go hunting and fishing. So we need to manage our forests. We need to clean them up. That's why they burn so hot and so fast and kill people and burn homes.
Governor Inslee, we do have more than 2 million acres. We're more than 2 million acres behind on the kind of forest management that prevents wildfires from being so devastating. Why did we get so far behind during your 8 years in office, and what are your plans to eliminate this backlog if you're elected to a third term?
Essex, I actually checked on this today. We have improved our management while I've been governor dramatically. Our investment has gone up by 7 or 8 times. Our acreage we have treated has gone up significantly. But there's 22 million acres of forest in our state, and it takes a lot of money to do that. You can't send out a gardener with a rake like Donald Trump suggested. So we are doing thinning. We are increasing thinning. It's a little frustrating because when I wrote a letter to Donald Trump asking him to do more thinning on the federal forests, he actually slashed the budgets for it. So there's a lot of lies coming out of the White House, and I think it's most distressing. But look, let's talk about the real issue here, which is climate change. For people to run for governor of the state of Washington at this date, with the damage that climate change is doing to our state, not just fires, but killing our salmon because the water's too acidic and too hot, and changing the hydrological cycle so that farmers don't have irrigation, and changing the very growing season we have. To have someone run for governor of the state of Washington following Donald Trump over this cliff into the abyss of climate change, that just, I believe, is unacceptable in our state. We deserve better. We believe somebody will not just follow science, but will act on it. And we have a plan to do that, and I hope you're going to ask me about it because it's a pretty important issue.
Mr. Culp, as you respond, would you tell us whether you have any policies that you would try to implement to make a difference in preventing climate change?
Yeah, I love clean water, clean air, clean land. No one cares about our climate, about our environment, than people that actually are hands-on with it. The farmers, the ranchers, the loggers, the hunters and fishermen. I've been a hunter and a fisherman my entire life. I spent days and hours on my whole life out in the woods and on the water. My grandpa was a commercial fisherman. My other grandpa on my dad's side was a sport fisherman. I grew up on the water. I grew up hunting. No one cares about the land and the water more than people that actually have hands-on. We need to get bureaucrats out of the way. Then the reason that we don't have salmon is because this governor has failed to take care of that. We need our hatcheries putting out 100%.
And Governor Inslee, as you respond, would you talk about whether anything you want to do with climate change would make much of a difference in the short term where we're already seeing these fires?
Yes. Well, what makes a difference in life is when you do something to save yourself and the health of your children. This is a health issue. And I think we should fight for a health that's causing respiratory distress. Our children should not have to breathe this smoke every day in the summer, which they're going to have to if we don't act on climate change. And I don't know what's worse, denying climate is caused by carbon or admitting it and refusing to do anything about it. And Chief Culp has proposed 0 policies to defeat climate change. We can grow jobs, and we deserve a little more time to talk about this, about how we're going to grow jobs in solar like we're doing in Bellingham, in cross-laminated timber like we're doing in Spokane, in solar panels, the solar farm in southeast Washington. We are growing jobs all over this state. This is a perfect economic growth opportunity for us, and I'm confident we can exploit those if we'll have a governor who understands climate change and job creation.
Okay, let me end it here. Thank you, gentlemen.
I want to talk a little bit about your record as governor, Governor Inslee. During your 2 terms in office, there have been several high-profile instances of mismanagement at state agencies under your watch. This includes, as Chief Culp mentioned, the decertification of Western State Hospital and the loss of more than $50 million per year in federal funds. It also includes, more recently, the mass unemployment fraud that we have seen that went undetected at the start of the coronavirus crisis, costing the state hundreds of millions of dollars. Given these kinds of lapses, why should voters have faith in your ability to competently manage the state for the next 4 years?
Because I care about them and I want to do everything humanly possible to help them. And the frustrations with the unemployment compensation difficulties are profound and sincere, and I feel them as much as, or more maybe, as people who are suffering them. Well, not more. But look what happened here. Natural disasters can destroy buildings, they can destroy agencies' capability to respond in a timely fashion. That is fundamentally what happened here. The number of claims went up by a factor of 10 overnight. Now that's kind of like 700,000 people showing up at the Husky Stadium that seats 70,000. These lines developed, and we have been moving heaven and earth to get people's checks to them who are entitled. Now it takes time to figure out who's entitled. We've hired 1,300 people. We've brought in the National Guard. They've done a great job. We've done new technology. And in the midst of that, these criminals of a sophisticated international ring attacked us just like they attacked other states, and they made off net with about 2%. But I'm pleased that 98% of those dollars went to deserving Washingtonians. And I'm happy that we've reduced the people who are waiting from the hundreds of thousands to a few thousands. And we are determined to do everything humanly possible to get those folks dollars. They need it. We've expanded workers' comp and unemployment. We want to help them. We have had moratoriums on evictions, and thank you.
Yeah. Chief Culp, I want to ask you a little bit about your background in management. You currently manage a police department of one person, yourself, and at its peak under your leadership as chief, I believe your department had 2 officers, including you. I am wondering, since you are a police chief in a town of 1,100 people, what makes you qualified to lead a state with 7.6 million residents and more than 68,000 state employees?
I appreciate that question. And as I said earlier, I'm not running to be the leader of everyone's family. I'm not running to be the leader of your business. I'm not running to be the leader of you. You, the citizens, will be the leaders of yourself, your family, and your business. I will be the governor that understands the servant role of the governor, and I will run the executive branch of the state government, and you will run your business and your life. That's the way it should be. That's the way a public servant should act. And this governor wants to tie me to things that he thinks that President Trump has done wrong. Well, and what did he call us? Called people that come to my rallies Trumpians? Is that the new deplorables, Governor? These are thousands of Washington citizens that come out to my rallies. These are people that care about their state from all over this state, from King County to Spokane County, from Ferry County down to Klickitat County. These are Washington citizens, and I'm hearing from them by the thousands every single day. And they don't like what's going on in this state. They want a servant government back, one that will stay within the confines of the Constitution and the rule of law.
I'm going to ask you each one quick question because we don't have much time at all. Chief Culp, you often talk about how we have a mental health problem and a drug problem, not a homelessness problem. But you also are saying you will not raise the state budget, you will not increase spending to, possibly address these problems. How would you invest in mental health and drug treatment if you are promising to cut the state budget?
I never said we don't have a housing problem, but it's not all about homes. This is about a mental health and addiction problem. We are already spending and wasting millions and millions of dollars across this state on mental health and drug addiction programs that are not working. I know of one, I toured one down in Longview not too long ago, that went from single-digit success rate to 76% success rate by taking less state funding and making their own rules.
I should have warned you, Chief Culp. We didn't have 45 seconds on this one.
15 seconds? Okay.
Yeah. I would like to hear from your campaign what that Longview program is, because I have not been able to actually get an answer on specifically what it is. Governor, we don't really have any more time, but I want to ask you very, very quickly. You had promised in previous campaigns that you would, you said taxes were not the right direction for our state when you ran in 2012. Do you anticipate tax increases will be necessary? Just answer in 20 seconds.
Well, you can't make that decision now. We have to look at the economic circumstances that we have in December. I will propose a balanced budget at that moment. I will protect health care. I will protect those who are most needy. I'll protect women who have choice right now that the Republicans want to take away. By the way, I also protect those from gun violence. And gun safety we have not talked about tonight, but I've heard Chief Culp talk about law and order. He's a law and order person. I'm sure he believes he is. I don't understand why he refuses to force the constitutional law that has been upheld that protects us from gun violence, from bump stocks.
We have to stop on
All right, gentlemen, we're out of time for questions. We got to move on to closing statements. We want to make sure you have time to wrap up your thoughts. Mr. Culp, we're going to have you go first. You just have 1 minute for a closing statement, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to cover what the governor just talked about, gun violence, right? Just like I said, he wants to focus the blame on something other than what it is. We don't have gun violence problem in this state or in this country. We have criminal violence problem. We need to focus on the criminals and put them in jail and in prison where they belong. And we need a governor that will quit releasing prisoners, convicted felons, violent felons, from our prison system and putting them back on the streets, back in our communities where they reoffend. You know, he released almost 1,000 of them because the state courts told him that he had to come up with a plan to keep prisoners safe from COVID in the prison system. And instead of coming up with a plan and keeping these violent felons in our state prisons, he said, open the gate, let them out. And then you add that to the 3,000 or 4,000 that were released not too long ago because of they said that it was a glitch in the Department of Corrections software that the governor knew about but didn't fix. 2 murders have happened because of that. And people have reoffended and are back in our jails and in our prisons because this governor is soft on crime and doesn't care about the citizens' safety.
All right, Governor Inslee, your closing statement, 1 minute.
Thank you. By the way, I have nothing against Republic. My grandmother was born there on April 4th, 1904. But I am against going backwards in our effort to build this state. We have shown profound progress in education, some of the best education in the state's history, profound progress in healthcare. We have demonstrated the ability to build a great economy. And now we can still do that, and I'm confident that we can return to those days. But first, we have to knock down this virus. We know that the key to opening up our economy ultimately is to reduce the number of people who are affected by this virus. And to do that, we do have to have leadership. We can't ignore this. We have to have a governor who will help people understand the science behind math and will understand the help to help businesses recovery, as we are doing right now. So I tell you, I'm excited about the prospects of leading this state. I'm confident. I believe bold, decisive leadership works. It has worked, and I hope it continues, and I'd be honored by your vote. Thank you very much.
Well, that is the end of the debate.
Yeah, we thank all of you for joining us for this debate, and Melissa's going to bring us out here.
Yes, that is the end of the debate. Thank you to the candidates for this discussion of the issues in the campaign for governor.
Our next debate is in a couple of weeks. It's on October 22nd. It's in the race for lieutenant governor between Denny Heck and Marco Lias.
And we want to thank our lead sponsor, AARP of Washington. Tonight's debate organized by the Washington State Debate Coalition and its founders, Seattle's City Club.
Ballots will be mailed to voters over the next 10 days and must be postmarked returned by 8 p.m. Tuesday, November 3rd. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Good night from the TVW studios in Olympia. And please, everyone, make sure to vote.